So we are 55 years into this big old thing called Doctor Who, and currently we're in this grey area between series, in fact between doctors and showrunners, where we're just waiting on that first trailer. So since there's not much future to really look at yet, how about the past? 1860, how does 1860 sound? If you get that reference, you win a cookie. So let's take a look back at 55 years of Time Lord tomfoolery and look at some things you might not have known. I'm Rich, your go-to for Doctor Who from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 mind-blowing Doctor Who facts you never knew.
But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done.
Number 8. The lead actors inadvertently follow the Troughton Rule. The second Doctor, Patrick Troughton, had some big shoes to fill when William Hartnell left the show. Not only that, the idea of regeneration was pretty new. I mean, by now, we all know it's a staple of the series, but then it was completely different, something no one had ever seen before. So he had it quite hard. Thankfully, he nailed it and the idea of regeneration has stuck, and it doesn't seem weird anymore. By 1969, though, the work was becoming a bit grueling, and he was considering leaving the show because he was worried about being typecast. Lo and behold, he eventually did. But this idea of being typecast has hovered over the rest of the actors' heads ever since, hence the Troughton Rule. Now, this Troughton Rule isn't anything really set in stone, but John Pertwee and Christopher Eccleston both cited being typecast as one of the reasons why they left the role, and Troughton himself actually said to Colin Baker on the set of The Two Doctors that you probably shouldn't be here for too long. Subsequently, Colin Baker left the show after 3 series. Now, in my opinion, if you play the Doctor, you are a Doctor, irrelevant of how long or how short you played him for. And I don't really see that as a bad thing, do you? Number 7. The 12th Doctor could have been the 8th Doctor. 12th Doctor Peter Capaldi was an absolute smash hit for the show. His stern but absolutely lovable character made up for the lackluster writing and Clara. Capaldi himself is a huge fan of the show, and when he made his acting debut in the 80s, he's obviously had his eye on the show ever since. He may have been the 12th Doctor, he may have appeared in 2008's Fires of Pompeii and in Torchwood Children of Earth in 2009, but he almost made his Doctor Who universe debut much, much earlier. After the show was cancelled in 1989, the plans for the eventual 1996 TV movie were laid. Capaldi was invited to audition for the role as the 8th Doctor, which of course we know eventually went to Paul McGann instead. Capaldi turned down the audition altogether, as much as he was a superfan, he wasn't convinced he'd be good enough. How stupid does that sound? Number 6. The 10th Doctor and Rose are responsible for the separation of the Doctor and Rose. Still too soon to talk about that absolutely heart-wrenching scene in Doomsday? Nah. Tooth and Claw from 2006 featured Queen Victoria, a werewolf, a very Scottish David Tennant doing his English accent doing a Scottish accent, and the origin of the Torchwood Institute. After all the shenanigans with the werewolf, Queen Victoria founded the Torchwood Institute, a means of defending Britain from aliens and stuff. A century later, and Torchwood decided to fanny around with the void between worlds, eventually releasing the Cybermen and the Daleks onto planet Earth. Of course, the Doctor and Rose turn up to save the day, but unfortunately Rose gets trapped on a parallel Earth. Emotional? Yes. Their own fault? Technically, yes. If they hadn't got themselves in a bit of a pickle with Queen Victoria and a werewolf a century earlier, Torchwood would never exist and the void would remain unfannied. Is that a word? Unfannied? But yeah, they'd probably still be together. Sorry for bringing Doomsday up again. Number 5. Christopher Eccleston wasn't originally the 9th Doctor. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Eccleston is the best. Fight me. But before Eccleston turned up and rebooted the series and did a great job of it, Richard E. Grant was given the title of the 9th Doctor when he portrayed the Doctor in a 2003 animated story, The Scream of the Shalka. The idea of rebooting the show was floating around at that point, but nothing was really set in stone, so giving Richard E. Grant the title of the 9th Doctor seemed okay. Then Russell T Davies and Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper happened and the show got rebooted. So when Eccleston took on the mantle of the 9th Doctor, Richard E. Grant was given the not-so-good title of the Shalka Doctor. Number 4. The 8th Doctor was half human somehow, then later wasn't. The 1996 movie is a weird one, a bit of canon that people either take or leave. One big revelation was that the Doctor was half human on his mother's side. I'm not entirely sure why Matthew Jacobs would put this tidbit in, but maybe it was a means of explaining why the Doctor was so infatuated with Earth and humanity. Maybe. Since 2014's Listen featured a young Doctor on Gallifrey, Stephen Moffat has essentially put his foot down to all this half-human nonsense by kind of implying the Doctor does have two Gallifreyan parents. As much as this little revelation might be completely swept under the rug now, it does not mean you should disregard Paul McGann as the Doctor. He deserved at least a series. Just go and watch Night of the Doctor. He did this years and years after the movie, and he's still incredible. Number 3. William Hartnell only received £315 per episode. The first Doctor received very little for kicking off the greatest sci-fi TV series of all time, at least by today's standards. Out of 52 weeks in a year, 48 weeks were spent in production, and every single week William Hartnell earned £315, which is about equivalent to around £4,050 by nowadays, so in a year he'd make just shy of £200,000. Now that's not really anything to shake a stick at. I mean, I wouldn't mind £4 grand a week, but compared to what the actors make now, it is quite a big gap. David Tennant reportedly earned around £1 million a year for the Doctor, and Matt Smith did take a pay cut, I say pay cut, $600,000 a year, also not bad at all. Of course, Doctor Who has a lot more money behind it now through DVD sales and merchandise and stuff, but it really does put it into perspective as to how big the show has got over 55 years. Number 2, Doctor Who could have ended after Tennant's departure. Pick the two Doctors. The Doctors. 1. Tom Baker, the icon of the classic series. 2. David Tennant, the icon of the rebooted series. This huge popularity Tennant had didn't really fare the BBC very well when he announced he was leaving the show back in 2008. The BBC knew how popular he was, and it genuinely concerned them when he left, because they didn't know whether the show would be able to run without him. They could have cast absolutely anybody as the Doctor, but they wouldn't be David Tennant. Sounds weird, but that was a genuine concern. Of course, Matt Smith turned up and made the show even bigger, especially in the States, but that concern was still there for the new showrunner Stephen Moffat. So much so, he actually asked Russell T Davies to stick around and write an episode or two to keep a bit of familiarity, but Russell T Davies went, "No, I'm out, bye." I would really like Russell T Davies to come back and write another episode, but it depends on whether Chris Chibnall or Jodie Whittaker could convince him. Number 1. 21 actors have starred as 19 Doctors, in the main continuity anyway. I've already mentioned the young Doctor that appears in Listen, but aside from the 13 main Doctors, including John Hurt's the War Doctor, 21 actors have played 19 different Doctors. Both Tom Baker and David Tennant have played 2 versions of the Doctor. Tom Baker, of course, playing the 4th Doctor and the Curator, who isn't the 4th Doctor, he's a future incarnation of the Doctor. David Tennant, of course, played the 10th Doctor and the Meta-Crisis Doctor in Journey's End. Richard Hurndall stood in for the late William Hartnell back in The Five Doctors, and David Bradley, of course, has played the first Doctor too back in Twice Upon a Time. Adrian Gibbs played the Watcher in Logopolis, a future incarnation of the 5th Doctor. The Valeyard, a further future incarnation of the Doctor, was played by both Michael Jaston and Jeffrey Hughes. Toby Jones played the Dream Lord, a psychic manifestation of the Doctor back in 2011. John Guyler provided a vocal cameo for William Hartnell in Day of the Doctor. And finally, an unknown actor played that young Doctor back in 2014's Listen. So many names to try and remember. And that's my list. What other Doctor Who facts have we not said here? Let me know in the comment section down below. And are you excited for Series 11? Just waiting on that trailer. I'm Rich, you might know me from the gaming channel, and if you don't, then you should go over there and watch my video on whatever happened to Roller Coaster Tycoon. If not, you want to stick around and look at some more Doctor Who content, then why not watch my video on Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who, 5 things it must ditch and 5 things it must do. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you soon.